I've only done this once before, and it seemed to work. So hopefully,
Okay.
but I like the boar's head back there with the
Oh
antlers.
yeah, that's the one that was in Dad's office.
Really? I don't even remember that. Is it a real boar's head?
It is a real boar's head. So he got it years ago for to use in church services because I don't know if you ever went to any of his really elaborate Christmas services, but
Oh,
he went all out. So he'd have like a kid riding a Yule log and like a donkey going through the sanctuary, and that's how we ended up with a donkey for a little while. He had like beef eaters carrying the boar's head. Magi, like Dickensian carolers. It was always a big production.
so what's with the boar's head? Like what that? Because there's like
so there's an old carol called the Boar's Head Carol.
I've heard that song.
French. I can't. I should be able to sing it, and I can't off the top of my head. But anyway, they sang that carol, and he had like 4 guys dressed like British palace guards carrying it in, and it had like ivy and an apple in its mouth and things like that while they sang the carol. So just typical Mark Christmas stuff.
Yeah. It seems like.
But I think there were a few things, like usually he could get the church to cover this thing or that thing, but they're like, we're not buying a boar's head, we're not buying a donkey, things like that. So he's like, fine, I'll get them. And so then he just, he'd get them with his own money and use them in the thing and then keep them. So hence the boar's head.
Did he put the antlers on it?
No, I put the antlers on it. He had an elephant nose on it and and a top hat.
Okay.
At various points, he often gets dressed up. So.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for doing this, though. By the way,
my pleasure. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Yeah. So, what have you been up to? Do you care?
No, that's fine. Okay. So I have been. I finished up a comic series around the end of the year, and then did some work for like a toy line that ties in with a TV show. And so at the end of Christmas, or like right around Christmas, I was suddenly free of immediate publishing obligations for the first time in like 2 years. And so I've been catching up on a lot of sort of outstanding things that have been put on the back burner for a while. And I've been working on a new story that I'm going to be doing starting probably first week of, I've been working on it, but I'll be starting pages on it first week in February.
Is it a new Krogan story or?
No, but it's in a similar type of feel. So it's not historical, it's fantasy, but it's still a swashbuckler. Oh, cool. There'll be lots of sword fighting and stuff like that. But nice. I really like the trappings of medieval fantasy, like castles and swords and things like that. But I want the landscape to be familiar to me, so there's going to be a whole lot of like Eastern Tennessee, Western North Carolina in there, a lot of Kentucky in there. Fun. So I've been up at the property doing sketches from time to time.
Oh, cool. That's
so cool. You'll probably recognize a lot of formations in it and be like, oh, that's over there. That's over there.
That's fun. Yeah. We were gonna go up this weekend actually, but then I think it was supposed to snow, and so we didn't know if we'd get stuck.
It's supposed to be miserably cold. I'm gonna go up this upcoming week and try to clear some of the trails. Okay. And then I think Allie and her kids are coming up on Friday.
Okay. Cool. Well,
and
if you want help, I'll meet you up there. Let me know.
Well, thanks, man. I'll give you a holler. I'm probably just gonna solo it this time, just because I'm gonna try and get some writing done. I figured it would be a good chance to get there and just focus all my attention on it. Not that I don't love your company, and usually I would take you up on it.
I see how it is.
But
no, I know exactly how that is. Where you can't. I don't know. Yeah, you have to give your time to something and.
Yeah, well, I'm really close to the end of outlining. So the way that I usually do a comic is I will do a pretty tight outline of what's going to be in the story, and I may deviate from that outline a little bit, but it gives me sort of the foundational stuff, and that's where I solve all the problems and make sure everything's going to make sense. and then I make everything else up on the page. So all the dialogue, all the interactions, how the scenes play out, I just know what the scenes are going to be, and then how they happen, I
Ah.
figure out while I'm drawing.
Oh,
So I
wow.
want to. So I'm very close to getting that outline done, or at least I think I'm pretty close. So I
Yeah.
feel like going and kind of forcing myself to finish it and not leave until it's done.
Can you give any previews or no? Is it
Yeah,
still in the
absolutely.
cooker? Okay.
It's so the stories or the series is called Outlaws Apprentice, and it's about a former mercenary, and she, when her dad dies, she takes over his like stained glass shop, and she's got a teenager who's her apprentice in it. But he gets into trouble, she gets into trouble, they get outlawed, he rescues her, and they figure that their best bet is to go on a cross country trip to find somebody who they think can pardon them, who owes
Wow.
the former mercenary a favor. So it basically, each story in it is them uh, finding themselves somewhere along the way of this trip, in some kind of situation where either people need help or they're hired to do something or something like that. So
That's
it
cool.
kind of follows like old TV Western structures, like Have
Yeah.
Gun Will Travel, or Wanted Dead or Alive, or something, or the Bill Bixby Incredible Hulk show, where stranger comes to town, there's a problem, stranger
Yeah.
solves problem.
That
Or
sounds
Burn
good.
Notice or Leverage, or any of that kind of thing. Like I really like that kind of like help for hire type of story. And I
Okay.
feel like it'll give me a good chance to do some uh good uh sword fighty bits, and
Yeah.
problem solving and character stuff. And there's going to be a goat in it, which I'm excited about because I love goats. And so Liz has a friend who raises goats, so she's going to see if I can't go by the farm, and do some goat sketches for
Okay.
a little bit.
I thought you
You
were gonna
watch
say
those
you were
old.
gonna borrow it for a while. I was
No,
like,
I wish, but the old, like the you remember when they used to show like the making of this Disney movie or that Disney movie, and it would show like them drawing a lion that they brought into the studio. It's like that kind of
yeah.
thing. Like
Nice.
I'll sketch it from a bunch of angles and see how it moves, and get comfortable drawing it to the point that when I get home and need to draw a goat, I can make a convincing goat.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah, that's nice. So what is it? Can you share what role the goat plays?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
is it a
Well,
main character?
I mean, part of it is I was thinking about how much junk you'd have to carry around if you were a medieval adventurer, and it's a
Yeah.
lot. And like in movies and stuff, there it's just like a guy in armor on a horse like riding through the woods.
Yeah.
But like you got to take that armor off, like you got to carry your food, do you have a bedroll, things like that. And I was like, well, I don't want them to have like a bunch of stuff. I don't want to have to draw horses a bunch. Like I'll draw horses occasionally, but horses are a pain.
Yeah.
And so if I can skip them, I
Yeah.
want to. And so I thought, well, what about like a little pack goat? Like it's just a
That'd be
goat, and it's got
great.
a thing on its back that you could just load all your junk on,
Yeah.
and it follows you around. And so it was born of logistics. And then I thought it could be really fun if the goat absolutely hates the kid, and the kid really wants the goat to like it. Like I feel like I can do some fun stuff with that, because usually
Yeah.
you get like bonding of the animal and the kid and things like. And I think it would be really, because we've got a cat that kind of hates us,
They
and
all do.
it yeah, and I feel like there's good opportunities for like character growth, but especially for like humorous situations there.
Yeah.
If the goat sort of causes as much trouble as it alleviates.
That sounds great.
So,
Yeah.
but I think his name's going to be Lil Gimlet,
I like that.
like
Nice.
Lil Lil apostrophe, because
Yeah.
I like naming anything Lil. Our one of our cats is Little Man, which we just started calling him that. We were going to give him a real name, but then that one stuck. So
Yeah. So with that story, do you have the whole structure, like the beginning and the end, or is it just kind of open ended and you're just gonna
it's
have them keep
right
going?
now. I have a very very loose structure for the story. So the way that I'm planning on doing it is I don't really have a clear idea for the overall series. Like um I know things that can happen in the world of this series. I know the type of things that they're going to come up against, but I feel like I don't really want to try and peg that stuff down until I get a chance to know the characters a little bit better and to know the world a little bit better, because that's going to suggest where it needs to go for me.
So it's a series then. That's
going to be
great.
a series. So
okay.
And I'm doing the way I'm doing it after I did Krogan's, like when I started doing the Creeps, I was like, I'm going to do shorter books and I'm going to really pack them in. And so like on the Creeps pages and things like that, sometimes they're, like 12, 15 panels on a page, even though this is a tiny book. And that's just dumb because it takes the same amount of time to draw that many panel. Like if I have a 3-panel page or if I have four 3-panel pages or 1 12-panel page, those 4 3-panel pages are going to take me the same amount of time to draw, like by and large, like so I'm going to want to work smaller and fewer panels and just let the book get as thick as it wants to be. But I'm treating them like short stories. So even though it'll probably be a 200-page book, it'll feel like an episode of TV, like as opposed to
That's cool. That's a lot of fun. Yeah. I feel like that. Did you say it was in kind of like in fairyland or something, sort of, or fairy tale?
Not really. I mean, it's a fantasy in the sense that it's not referencing anything in the real world, and I've made up the country that it's in.
Oh, okay. But it's kind of medieval setting and.
Kind of. It's like medieval mixed with Kentucky, Tennessee.
That's fun. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Because I'm like, I want fringe and I want alligators. Like, how come the knights never fighting alligators? Like, I want them to. So. Anyway, so I'm just throwing a whole bunch of stuff together and hopefully it'll be fun and exciting.
Yeah.
But how about you? What have you been up to?
Nothing really, just working. And then last year I was actually trying to write and I figured out how difficult it is. Like, I know what you're talking about, like having to get familiar with the characters and actually like figure out who they are. And then I'd write something down and I'd be like, oh, it's this character doing it. And then I'd read it later. And I'm like, that's not that character. It's this other one over here or something. Yeah, it was kind of odd. But then since this year started, I haven't been, mostly just working. And then I thought I'd try to be a little more active in doing podcasts or whatever. Cause I think I did like 5 maybe last year is all. And so so I've just been kind of reaching out to people here and there and just whatever, just talk about whatever interests people. If people want to share their story, I don't know, just for fun. So, I mean, this year hasn't been going on very long, so I don't know.
Well, that's good. Well, look, you're already hitting the ground running.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
I've never started a year not behind before, and that's been really exciting.
That's good.
Or at least I not in recent memory. And so so a lot of the stuff I mentioned, like catching up on stuff. Do you know what Patreon is?
Yeah.
So I do a Patreon, but I haven't charged any of my patrons in the last year because I fell behind on doing things and I felt bad about charging until I could do any more.
Yeah.
So but the way that I do that, and for people listening to the podcast, what Patreon is kind of like NPR. Like people donate a certain amount to somebody that's producing something that they like in the hopes that it will continue to be produced. And so in my case, that's like drawing, and then I do like historical essays and make little paper figures and things like that and put them up. And so and they're different, like just again, like using NPR as the example, like you do X amount to NPR and you get like a tote bag. For mine, there's a level where you can pay X amount, and then once a month that you're charged for, you get to commission a drawing. So you get to say, well, I would like a drawing of this person or that person, and I will do that drawing. And I got really behind with my publishing obligations, and so I started doing those and didn't have time to do the Patreon things, and I amassed about 250 pieces that I had to do. And so that's when I was like, I'm just cutting it for now, and I'll let people know, if you've been charged, then you'll get it. But I've gotten a quarter done. I think I'm on track to get a third done. My hope is that I can get them all done by the end of March. And so I'm spending a little bit of time each day working on those, sometimes a lot of time, but usually about 2 or 3 hours. And then the rest of the time I'm working on something else, either comic for Scholastic, which is like a regular gig that I do, or working on Outlaws Apprentice, or other things that, grab my attention. So,
Yeah.
um, and my hope is eventually to get it to where I can do that for like 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day once I get back to charging, and stay on top of things, and not fall behind again like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I think I've seen some of your commissions and stuff. You'll post them and everything. So yeah.
They're
Yeah, they're
fun
good.
to do, and I like it because they give me the chance to do to draw subject matter. Well, there's two different things. So I have two different commission tiers. There's one that is the sort of like what I said, like you can commission anything. And that's interesting because sometimes it's a lot of my patrons tend to have found me because we have shared interests. Like I'll post a bunch of drawings of this thing or that thing, and that particular patron also likes that thing or that thing. So
That's nice.
the chances of me drawing something that I already know and like are reasonably good. But then there's also the chance that I'll be doing stuff that I don't know, that I've never heard of. And so sometimes it'll be like a show or a movie that I haven't seen, or a video game that I haven't played, which is almost every video game. Because I didn't have a system when I was a kid, and I have one now, but it's and I've gotten probably like 8 games for it, and I've sort of played 2 of them.
Yeah. I'll do the same thing.
It's
I'll
like
get
taking the
excited.
time.
Yeah, I get excited about a game and then I go get it, and then I'm like, now I gotta invest all this time into it. And
Yeah.
even if I know the stories.
I don't actually even do the play things. Like I got the Assassin's Creed games, and they have this discovery mode so that you can like wander around ancient Egypt, or
Yeah, you told me about that. Yeah.
medieval England or something. And that's all I do is I just wander around ancient Egypt.
Which is
I don't actually
actually
play the game. I just look at the pyramids.
Yeah, and that's probably good for actually, like, you should write that off on like taxes. That's good for your research, right?
I do.
Yeah. There you go.
That's one of the best things about what I do is that so much of what I would be doing if this weren't my job now is actually a legitimate expense. Like it's research, it's inspiration, it's reference, it's whatever else it might be. So like almost all of the books that I get, almost, my streaming services, because I'm writing narrative, like any movies that I'm watching are informing my views on that, etc. So it's
nice.
So tax wise, it's great. I love it.
That's great.
And Liz is a real stickler. So podcast people, Liz is my wife. But Liz is a real stickler for doing it right. And so I'm like, so Liz, these characters are eating this, and I went and ate this on this day as reference. And she's like, nope, does not count. And I'm like, no. And so she's really careful about not ever overstepping. And I want to write off everything. And so we find a balance of legitimate expenses versus, it could in theory be a stretch. But
that's because I remember you telling me about those games, and it sounded fun. I never did actually crack them open though, but I don't know.
Well, they're pretty. If you ever find your way up here, you can take a crack at them.
Okay.
But anyway, so going back to the commissions, like there's frequently things that I don't know that I'll get to draw, and then there's also another thing that I started, which is a category commission, which is I have a list of probably like 15 categories of things that I like to draw, and people pay less money and they say, draw me something from the Trojan War, and I get to draw whatever I want as long as it fits into that category. So that's fun. Great because it gives me a chance to draw something that I'm excited to draw. And then also those oftentimes become part of other projects. And so they might become toys or Christmas ornaments or something.
That's cool. That sounds like a lot of fun.
So the person gets the original art, and then I will do something with, my scan of that art.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I think I remember I really liked the what was it? You had one of I think it was Socrates or something when you did your writers one. I like that one a lot too.
Oh yeah,
I remember
Homer.
that one. Was it Homer? Okay. Yeah, that was good.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, I mean, I like all of them, but I remember you had the art, like the writers collection, because you were doing a couple of them when you were doing the cutouts and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I thought about it today, like it wasn't something that I had really thought about it all that much about, but I'm thinking about self-publishing the Outlaws Apprentice books because I'm always somewhat frustrated with the lack of control over design aspects of a book.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, this will give me a chance. But one of the things that I realize is that I'm really bad about promoting a thing once it's done and out. And that's really important if you're self-publishing. Like you've got to continually sell that book past the day that it comes out. And I'm a big fan of like doing something until the day it comes out and being like, everybody, here it is. And then I never talk about it again.
Well, you can always
come to something else.
Well, we can always do this again. I have like, I think maybe 10 listeners. So, you know.
Well, I was thinking about, because you mentioned those author figures, like I was going to keep doing those and like do a whole bunch of author figures. And I did a batch of like 30 of them.
Yeah.
And I haven't done any since then, even though I think there's a demand for it and an audience for it with the Sherlock Holmes set that I did. You know, I did
I remember that. That
a big Sherlock Holmes set, and I was going to keep adding a new figure every, quarter or something. And I haven't done any because I did it and it's done and I want to do something else. And that's not from a business standpoint, that's a really lousy modus operandi. Like I need to get better about actually continuing to do things that people want a continuation of. Yeah. And continuing to sell them. Like once I did those Sherlock Holmes things, I never tried to sell them again. Like people who didn't know about it at the time will never have heard about them because I've never mentioned it on any social media things or in person or brought them to shows or whatever else, because it's done. I'm doing something else.
You're mentioning it now, so there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean though. It's kind of like, it's almost like you finish the project and then it just feels complete. And it's like the book closes and then it's, I don't know, onto something else. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is fine if other people are responsible for selling that thing. But when you're producing and making your own things, like you don't ever have, I think a lot of artists rely pretty heavily on I guess what you'd call passive income, things that you've already done that continue to make money for you. Yeah. And I've got virtually no passive income because I never do anything that continues to sell. I sell stuff myself and then I stop selling it and I start selling something new. And that's real bad, really bad business.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm the same way though. I understand that. Like that book I sent you, which I did on Amazon. So I mean, if you like that, there you go. Yeah. So that, like I don't think probably other than a few people know about it, because I uploaded it and then I was like, it's on there. There we go. Yeah. And I don't even talk about it or anything. But I didn't mind the quality though. I don't know.
No, I think it looks good, and I've been looking at that as actually that's one of the things that makes self-publishing kind of viable, is at least on the book thing. Like if I do like a bigger comic that I'm doing a lot of copies of, I may look at something else. But I think I'm probably going to do an art book like this. And a big reason I haven't is that the minimum order to make it worthwhile to do is so high historically that it's just like I don't have the space to store any more art books. Like I feel like I can sell probably 500 in a year initially, and then that's it, and then maybe a few after that each year, at conventions and stuff. But if I order 500, like the price difference between 500 and 1,000 is almost nothing, so I might as well order 1,000, and then I have 500 extra books sitting in my basement that take forever to move. So it's like, so it's tricky. So the Amazon model of not having a minimum order, of it just being printed as people order it, is really appealing, as is the being able to buy author copies at print costs. So I did some test things. Like I made a little test booklet to see like how things would look, and I was really happy with it. So
I was too. The colors like came out a lot better than I was expecting.
They look really nice. I'm really happy with them. And the other big thing that I really like about it is that I've got a lot of overseas readers for whom shipping is really prohibitive, like if they wanted to get stuff. And so like if I have to send a book to like England or something, it's hey, if I send a poster or a print, it's like $13. If I send a book, it's like 20 and more. Um, and then there are
Yeah.
some countries where it's like substantially more. And so them being able to go to amazon.co.uk and ordering it and it coming for the same price as they'd get it here, I think I'm going to be able to
Yeah.
sell a lot of copies overseas as well, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah. Sounds like the way
Again,
to go.
I'll sell it that first week. I'll be like, hey, here's a book, and then I won't ever say anything about it
Yeah. Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. There's one. I do want to like kind of maybe talk about some of that stuff you sent me, the ideas you had. But I did want to bring up one book though that I read. I think it was this past summer of yours, and I don't know when you did it, but you did it with your dad. It was the one about the potato, right? The potato guy.
The Giovanni potato.
Giovanni.
And the
Yeah, that was great.
You're one of 3 people who has read that.
Yeah, that was a good book. So we should keep that one going too.
That was one. I did that in college with him. I hadn't like I think I drew the cover for it and it just said like Giovanni Potato and the Pizzas of Love, and he's like, "What are you doing with that?" And I said, "Nothing." And he's like, "Yes, you are. I'm going to write an obnoxiously long poem and you're going to illustrate it." And I said, "Okay."
It was good.
And so he wrote it. Thanks. And then in like my first grad school class, they were like, "You got to pick a project." And I was like, I guess I'll illustrate this thing that my dad wrote. And they said, "Okay." And I got about halfway through it and I was like, "Oh, I really hate working on this project. I want to do something else." And the teacher, who was only there one semester and he got let go because he was never in class and was just sort of all over. But the one really good thing that he did was not let me quit that project. He's like, "No, you have to finish it." And I said, "Oh, fine." And I finished it, and it was finished, and I was really happy with it.
Yeah, I like the ending. It was great.
Thank you very much. So that one was fun to do, but that was that I don't really count it because I didn't write it, and also because it was we argued over format. Like I did it one way, and then dad was like, "I don't like that way," and he went and published it another way, and I was like, "What are you doing?" And so we had like 2 competing versions of the book. Like he had the black and white one that was kind of big, and I had where is it? I've got them around here somewhere. And I did it like really tiny. So these are like business card size. And it's 4 slipcase things that I put together by hand with glue.
That's hilarious.
And we had to cut them on a paper cutter, like not even a thing, like a chunk. So each page made 13 front and back pages, and it's really tiny. And each one of these probably took about 10 hours to put together, and I charged $12 for them.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was not I have a habit of doing this kind of thing, like really underestimating how long something is going to take and undercharging for it. So it's a miracle that we have a house, but we do. We're we're lucky. Like basically this podcast is me just griping about how bad I am at making decisions as a quote unquote working artist.
Yeah, I have a lot of, I don't know. I keep thinking of a lot of questions, but I don't know. I'm like, I don't know what to ask. So, like, I mean,
hit me with whatever.
I wanted to ask, like, I really wanted to get to the stuff you sent too. That's why I'm debating on what to ask. But do you have your characters yet for the Outlaws Apprentice?
I do. Yeah. So I've got my main 2. I've had figured out for a little while, and I'm still kind of I know what they look like, but I'm not entirely 100% on what their personalities are like. Okay. And I think one of the things that I'm wanting to do with the mercenary character is part of fantasy and part of pulp and escapism for me is that when I was a kid, when I was a teen, even when I was a young adult, I was a big fan of just acting without thinking. I got into I never really got into fights over me being mad, but I got into fights over principle a lot. Like actual like physical fights.
Yeah.
And uh and
That's
I
funny.
never like felt any regret over that or anything like that. And I think that when that changed for me is um I had a friend who was assaulted, and I was going to go and mess up the fellow who did it. And I drove like an hour to his house. Like I got his address, and I was going to go and rough him up. I was probably 20, 21 maybe. And when I got there, uh, he was walking like a toddler around the yard, and I started like wrestling with, well, what happens if I rough this guy up and he's this baby's sole source of, uh, you know, I don't know,
Yeah.
financial support or XY. Anyway, there were all these different things, and I ended up not doing anything and going home. That was probably the last time I ever went to somebody's house to beat them up.
The last time. How many times did you
Uh,
do that? This is a common
a
thing.
few.
That's funny.
But it's one of those things where like as you're an adult, you weigh these different and I still, like I think I probably should have beaten him up, but I did, it's one of those things where I don't know. And ever since then I've wrestled over questions of the appropriateness of violence and which situations and how,
Yeah.
your responsibility to people who can't take care of themselves or who can't defend themselves. If you're in a position where you can defend them, like, can you do
Yeah.
that? Or and and as an adult, there's so many variables that come into play with this, and it's really hard. And so my thought is, I want this character to not ever think about that. Like, I want her to always just be like, nope, I'm going to get in the fight for
Yeah.
this. And then if he's like,
That's
wait,
funny.
no, I'm going to get in a fight for that. Like there's never any wishy-washiness over it. And I think that the other character, the kid character, can be nothing but concern over context. And I think that that'll create a nice juxtaposition. It'll also give me a chance to wrestle with things that I wrestle with a lot.
Yeah.
But also to have this sort of escapist character who's just gonna, like if she sees injustice, she's just gonna go hit somebody on top of the head.
Yeah.
And that's not something that I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But like I think that's one of the things that a lot of people really like about like pulp stories and action stories and detective stories is that it's less that there's and those particular types of characters, whether it be Indiana Jones or James Bond or John Wick or whoever. I think it's less that they do these exciting things and more that there's no hesitation in the doing of them that makes people respond to them. And I think there could be something fun with that. But I'm
Yeah.
not 100% on her personality. I'm not 100% on the kid's personality, but that's sort of the core conflict that they'll have.
Yeah.
But I think that I like the idea that they're gonna like that's a conflict, but that they're going to work. They're still going to be friends and have a lot of good like ways that they help each other and benefit each other, and that they benefit from each other's company.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
but I have a
great.
lot of supporting characters, and the supporting characters I think I have figured out pretty well.
That's cool. It kind of reminds
It's
me a
just
little
those
bit
mains.
of I don't know why. It kind of made me think of a little bit of Spock and Captain Kirk or something.
Yeah, and I think they did that with that. Like I've watched almost no original Star Trek, but I'm
Yeah, I haven't
familiar
really
enough
either.
with it
Yeah.
through cultural osmosis. But yeah, the creator, Gene Roddenberry, he wanted the three main characters, Doc, or Bones, McCoy, or Bones, Spock, and Kirk, to be basically like manifestations of the id, the ego, and the super ego.
Yeah.
And that would just by its nature create these intergroup conflicts that would be really neat. And he was right, and they absolutely do. But I think that's sometimes where the richness of character can come through, is when the creator of a particular story or particular characters is finds things within themselves that are in conflict and
Mhm.
finds a way to manifest themselves in that. Because I think that, you know, we all wrestle with that stuff. And the thing is, some people are going to identify with the kid, and because neither one is going to be necessarily wrong, they're
Yeah.
just going to approach things differently. And so, and
Yeah.
Master and Commander is another good example of that kind of thing, where you have these
That's a
two
great
different
movie.
characters who
Yeah.
approach things very differently, and they can still be friends and they can still work together for something. But
Yeah.
there's drama just in the fact that they see the world differently, and I think there's richness for that.
That's really cool. Yeah, I like that idea a lot too. There's I
It's
kind
gonna
of
be
know
it's a lot better as I say it now than it's going to be an execution. Like when I
yeah.
do it, it'll be
No,
okay at
no.
best.
Yeah, you can't. Well, you can't. I don't know. It's kind of hard though, because when you're actually like doing it and executing it and trying to write it down, I feel like it's if you're being too particular, or almost if you're thinking about it too much, you kind of ruin the story. Like you just kind of have to let
Yeah,
it go and see what happens, and then maybe go back and tweak it later. You know, if there's, I mean, you're obviously going to tweak some stuff later, but yeah, there's a
yeah.
yeah, because
Well,
there
and
was one.
the tweaking is kind of tricky, because like with with writing, whether people are writing novels or plays or movies or things like that, like the biggest thing that you hear over and over is that writing is rewriting. Like, you write something
Mhm.
and you go back and you revise it and you revise it and you find things in it. And the tricky part with comics, and this is why I do as much of that revising and reworking as I can in the outline, is that you can't really go in and like add a panel or remove a panel or something like that without changing the whole page.
Yeah,
And if you change the whole page, then all of a sudden the page turn, like you want your sort of cliffhanger to be in the bottom right corner of your
yeah,
right page, like
uh,
that has to change. So like if you change a panel, you might have to remove a whole page or add a whole 2 pages or something like that in order to account for it. And so it can be really, and then you worry about the page flow, because you're not just like drawing a panel and then adding another panel and then adding another panel. Like the whole page sort of works organically, and all those panels interconnect in a way that influence each other, and so changing any one of them changes all of them.
yeah,
It doesn't for everybody, but I feel like if you're doing it right, it does it. And I've
mm,
editors that like it's really frustrating. They're like, "Can you change this?" And I was like, "Sure." And I turned in like 3 new pages, and they're like,
oh.
"What did you do?" I was like, "Well, you can't just do that one thing. You got to do all of it." But also, I'm insane.
Also,
So I
I'm
mean, like,
insane.
you have to. Not everybody makes as bad decision. Like, I I have a real problem with prioritizing things. Like for me, everything is important. And so like being like, okay, well, I can let this one thing go and concentrate on this is very hard for me. Like I have to concentrate on everything.
Yeah. Sorry, I was looking at trying to find that thing you had sent. Uh, pull it back up. Sorry, I lost it. But
No, no trouble.
yeah, yeah, that's cool. I think like we were kind of already in basically the thing one of the ideas you sent was the storytelling aspect, like just talking about storytelling and
Mhm.
stuff. So yeah, I think we're kind of already in that. But that's really interesting though. I don't know. That's a lot of fun. It's fun, like just getting to learn, like you said, just discover the characters. So what are your side characters? Are they do you
So so the thing with the side characters, at first I was just like, well, I want to do these characters that I think would be fun to draw or have in a good thing. So one of the main ones is sort of there will be in each individual story, there will be sort of a story antagonist who is going to be the person that is causing the trouble in whatever town they're in that they have to figure out how to stop. But then there's also going to be the essentially like the U.S. Marshal that's after them,
okay?
and that's
Yeah.
going to arrest them. And so so he's going to be sort of a main character. And then I've got a couple others. I have one that I'm like, well, how do it's fantasy. I can play with some kind of like magic-y element. Like I don't really want like wizards shooting, laser staffs, but I was like, well, what if there are people like, so I had an idea for one type of character. It was called Avenger. And basically it's somebody that you can hire if you feel like justice has not been done, you can petition to hire this particular person to come in and like wreak vengeance on your behalf. And their motto is, you can't buy justice, but you can buy vengeance.
That's
And I was like, well, how would you like train somebody to be good enough to like just take out whoever had wronged you or something? So basically they're these assassins. And I thought, well, what if like they do everything, or their bodies process everything at double speed. So if I'm fighting you and my mind is working twice as fast as yours and my perception is working twice as fast as yours, it doesn't really matter how, I mean, ideally I'm going to be, trained as a fighter or something, but that alone gives you such an edge to be able to block things or move things or stuff like that. And so that's my thought, is that they could do this twice as fast, but they do everything twice as fast. Their metabolism is twice as fast. They have to sleep twice as much, and they die twice as soon. And so, like you
fun.
take these potions to do this or something when you're like 20, and so by the time you're 30, you're really 40, and then by the time you're 40, you're really 60 or what. And so,
Wow, that's a great idea. That's
so
fun.
I was like, one of those would be one of the characters. Something that was kind of fun that I hadn't thought about. There's a writer that I like, that I've been reading lately, named Sebastian de Castell. He's a Canadian guy. And I asked for some recommendations. I was like, what books have some good sword fights in them? And somebody recommended his series, The Greatcoats, which is kind of musketeer-y. And I really enjoyed them. And so I got on YouTube and was looking for interviews with him. And he was talking about some of the music that he writes the music a lot, and that he finds like scenes based on particular songs. And I was like, well, I write to music a lot. Like I tend to immerse myself in like the genre that I'm working in. So if I'm doing like a Western, I'm only listening to like Western movie scores.
Mhm.
But then his thing was like, he was like, well, what type of song were you working on uh for this particular thing or that particular thing? And he was like, well, for this character I was listening to Cobra Style by the Teddy Bears. And I was like, oh, that's like that's not at all like what I was thinking. And so I was like, well, what kind of uh music might go with these things? So I just like put a list of songs that I like and songs that feel kind of narrative to me. And I was like, in playing some of these songs, they helped me find the character more. So I have this one character called the Gate Knight, who's just this guy who loves life, and he loves being a knight, and he loves fighting, and he loves going to tournaments and things like that. But I was listening to I Would Walk 500 Miles by the Proclaimers, and I was like, this is that guy's
That's
song.
funny.
And it's
Yeah, it's
and
funny.
in listening to it, I like pictured his morning, like how he gets up, and he gets up and he's like, walking through his hallway naked, and his like servants are running, throwing like a robe over him and feeding him bacon and things like that. And like while he's still in his pajamas, like somebody throws him a wooden sword, and like these five guys like in heavily like pillow padding like run up to fight him, and he like fights them off on the way to breakfast just as practice. And he gets down and he has like a big plate of things, and they're bringing him, just like a jug of wine and a thing full of eggs and things like that. And he's just eating and real happy. And I like the idea of this. And it just helped me shape this character in my head, like based on this.
That's
And then,
cool.
and there's another song that I was listening to that I was like, this one kind of feels like that cop that's chasing him. And then there's a part in the song where it gets kind of like weird and discordant. And I was like, oh, that's him. And he's not completely right. Like he's got some rage issues that are like boiled down, and they're going to come up in unexpected moments. And
Wow.
like, and so like finding different things and pulling from different areas can be really helpful for that. And that's something that I haven't really done very much. And that I think is going to give a richness to the characters that I tend to default to like archetypes. I'm like, well, if this guy is
Yeah.
the old miner, he's the old miner. Like that's
Yeah.
the character that he is.
I
And I'm
like
like,
that though. Yeah.
but the ones that I respond to are the ones that have like some kind of something about them that's really specific, and that's fresh. And so like the old miner makes me think there's an author that I really like named Manly Wade Wellman. And he actually lived just on the like where Cott County meets North Carolina.
Okay.
Like if you turn right out of the off of Old 15th instead of left towards Del Rio, or off of at the post office. If you turn right at the post office and drive for like 10 miles, you get to where he used to live. But he wrote these horror stories that are kind of like the X-Files. He started writing in the 20s and kept going until the 70s. And they're but the thing that I love about them, they all take place there. They're all like right in those mountains. But the thing that like cracks me up is like everybody in them is hyper educated. And so like, hey Cletus, come away from your moonshine jug and come over here. And he's like, all right, what y'all need? And he's like, hey, we need your help. You studied ancient Sumerian at Case Western. And he's like, I sure did. I did my doctorate in it. And it's like, and all the characters are like that. So that, you know, like the go to the expert scenes is basically just whoever is around.
That's great.
And I love that. And like, but it's these sort of unexpected things that I think can add a lot of richness to the story. And so trying to find that in my own characters is sometimes a struggle for me. And so when I can find it, I'm always really happy, because you don't want it to feel contrived. You don't want it to feel like you're making them quirky for the sake of quirky. You want it to feel like whatever they are, it's a natural part of them, but figuring out what that natural part is. So that's when we lean a lot on people that we know and things like that, and or people we've heard about, or aspects of ourselves that we don't necessarily put front and center, but it's stuff that I think hopefully enriches the story a little bit.
That's really cool. That's a really cool idea. I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to be thinking about all this for a while. That's great. You mentioned, here's one too. I was actually talking to a friend of mine a while back. You mentioned the old miner, kind of like this archetype character. He had brought up something about an astronomer. Have you ever tried like pairing those two together or anything like that? Because we were talking about it, and I was like, one's like searching the heavens and the other one's like searching the earth, and it's kind of this weird.
That's real good. That's a really good thing. Or actually, I would like to see that be the same character, like a potential, like that's the hobby, is like going down and going up or something. Although I think that what you're talking about is pairing them up also really works. But
well, use it, take it, steal it.
Really good. I don't know. The thing, like I'm so bored by astronomy. I know a lot of people really dig it. It's like it's never had any appeal to me. Like I'm like the moon's kind of neat.
No,
as far as I go.
I love looking at the stars, but studying them, I'm like I've never really got into that. But yeah, that was kind of my thing too, because I'm more drawn to the miner for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah,
and
me too. I'm like
a little goblin that burrows underneath or something. I'm like that interests me more for some reason. But but then because I think the friend I was talking to, he was trying to find characters like inside himself. I basically like different emotions and see like, oh, that's kind of like this character, and I think he said one of them was an astronomer, and I was like, I don't know if I have that one. I might have a miner though, but I don't know.
I like that idea of the astronomer and the like. I do really like that, and I like that as like they feel kind of like I mean modern versions of like Greek pantheon type of things. It's like the miner, the astronomer, or something, or like tarot card people, or it seems like they signify something. It's like like the astronomer is seeking out. But again, I'm like, I look at that and I'm like, that astronomer's got his head in the clouds. Get down in the mine.
It's like what's that called, like Gnosticism or something, when people are just like up the heavenly. I don't know. I'm just
that's really neat. I like that. I like that dichotomy. I haven't.
I don't know if there's more of them. I'd like to try to think of more. It's kind of weird to think about. I don't know. But I was gonna ask you about the one. I don't know. Do you have to go soon? Probably
no, I'm
like
good.
30 minutes. Oh, okay. I didn't know. Oh, I did want to, before you had to leave, I was gonna ask you about the drawing, because you said you put on here like drawing biblical and historical things.
Well, you had said, do you want to do the podcast? And I was like, well, what would we talk about? I mean, or what? Let me rephrase. What would we talk about that would be of any interest to anybody else? rather than like, oh man, the bridge washed out again. We got to figure out what to do. Like,
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
that's pretty us specific.
Yeah, yeah.
Although I do have some ideas I want to run by Jessica to see how sound they are for
bridge.
putting a bridge back
Yeah.
in that spot.
Yeah, where the bridge is always gone.
Where the bridge is always gone. Because
is it a hanging bridge? Is that what you're thinking?
I'm thinking a hanging bridge, but I'm thinking like absurdly high hanging bridge. So
Sounds fun.
No way that it's getting torn out. Again, not a conversation for this podcast, and I apologize. But I was thinking, both of us draw biblical characters, and I thought it might be I was kind of curious because I have thoughts as to how I approach it. I was thinking like how, because I wanted to hear your thoughts on it. Like, how do you approach things that have been drawn or painted 1,000 times before and make them yours? Or do you worry about that? Do you have the ego that I have where you're like, oh, this one's got to be mine,
I don't know. It's weird. I like, I don't know, because the one I did remember I did one, the first one that came to mind when you asked that question was I did one of the cherubim or cherubim thing. And mine was kind of like this mythological looking creature or something, but I don't think I had really seen a lot of pictures of it before. So I was just drawing from like the description it gives in the book of Ezekiel. It has like calves' feet and all this stuff, and it's the four faces. But then I see pictures of it, and it's like this circle with a bunch of eyes and like these wings, like, and I was like, that's nothing like I'm thinking of. But I think it's because they're I don't know. So that one, I don't think it was. I don't think I really had to go up against like a image I already had in my head. I don't know. I kind of actually there's one I got. I should show you.
I mean, I like a lot of your drawings a lot. But
thanks. There was one I was going to show you. I actually didn't put it in there because I drew it and I was like, this seems like pretty sacrilegious, actually. Can you hold on one second? I'll just go find it. It should be right here. Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. So this one, I drew this because I was like thinking about the ascension, and I was like, I always just think about it very materialistically, and then I was like, I'm just gonna draw it how I would, like, kind of mocking my own like preconceived idea of it. And so I don't know if you can see that. But then I didn't want to.
Here's the thing, there's nothing wrong with it.
But then I didn't want to, like, I was like, after I drew it, I was like, well, it kind of offends me a little bit. And it's like, Jesus just, and I don't know why.
Okay, first off, that makes me very happy that you've offended yourself with a drawing. Like, I love that.
Yeah. But then, so I didn't really want to put it in because I was like, there's something, but then I thought about it more and I'm like, if I just did this and just covered up the balloons, that's exactly what it looks like to me. Like in my mind, like, I don't know how else to picture it. And I still don't, because I'm like, I believe in physical resurrection.
If you replace those balloons with like tiny baby angels, like, you've just got a Renaissance painting.
Oh, there we go. That's true. But
like, you've got a lot of decision making in these that I really love, like the Asael. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
I never know either. Yeah.
But where it's, he was fleet his foot like a wild gazelle. Like you leaned into the gazelle motif. Like his helmet has antlers on it. He's got these different things. He's real lean. Like, there's some like really cool that, like, I love for my Bible art that I see or that I draw to be out of the box, because I feel like one of the things that there are different ways that different people approach stuff, but like for me, the thing that makes Bible narratives, as opposed to the lessons or things like that, but just like, going into the stories themselves, the thing that gets me paying attention is when something runs counter to my expectations. And I've got a lot of expectations because, we would all watch the TNT Abraham movie when we were kids, or the VeggieTales versions, or Charlton Heston 10 Commandments or something like that. And so there's and you have the picture Bible and the comic Bible and all the different Bibles with images in them. And a lot of the stuff tends to have a familiarity to it. And that's not to say that it's not accurate. Like, I think one of the interesting things about the Heston 10 Commandments is that Cecil B. DeMille spent so much money financing like Egyptian research to get the backgrounds right, that essentially like he pushed the field of Egyptology ahead by like 10 years.
Whoa.
Which is really neat. Also, kind of interestingly, all the 10 Commandments that are in front of courthouses were promotional things for the 10 Commandments movie.
Really?
That Cecil B. DeMille was involved with the Eagles Lodge, and he teamed up with them to do all these 10 Commandment statues in front of courthouses. So that those a lot of time, like, everybody's like, they've been there since the beginning. We're like, no, they got there during the 60s when they were promoting the 10 Commandments. Which is really funny to me that it's a thing, which I only found out about that because I was reading a book about book plate collections, and it had Cecil B. DeMille's and it had an eagle, and it was like, signifies this connection with the Eagles Lodge, which helped him do the 10 Commandments in front of courthouses in promotion for the movie.
Dang.
I was like, what? And, but anyway, beside the point, like, so the costumes and everything like that in those are very accurate, but that doesn't mean they're the only version of that. And anytime I see something that is weird to it, like a good example is did you see the Noah movie that came out?
Yes, I like that. Yeah, I actually liked it.
Movie.
Okay,
so
good. Thank God.
I hate the Noah movie.
I thought it was great. I've watched it at least like twice at least. And I was like, this is amazing.
It's like, as a movie, it's kind of a mess. However, as a Bible movie, I think it's amazing because like once you get to Abraham, things kind of normalize from a historical standpoint. But pre-Abraham is bonkers. It's just bonkers.
There's giants, all sorts of stuff.
That movie just leaned into that bonkersness and is like, look, this is a period clearly prehistory. We treat it the same way we would treat, like a Hercules movie or whatever movie,
like a myth. Yeah.
And I really liked that. And so
I did too.
Anytime I can do that kind of thing, especially with depictions of I don't know, just any of it, I get really excited.
Yeah, and I that movie, I thought it was great. They like have you ever read the Book of Enoch?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they took a little bit from that. I see the thing is, like, I think people got upset about it, but I think they actually did a lot of research on.
I think it fit pretty well with it. Like, I think
I did too.
I don't know why people got upset. I mean, I think people got upset because it wasn't what they were expecting.
Well, and I think a lot of people didn't like the whole Mickey Rourke sneaking on the boat or something. But I was like, I still liked it. I thought it was
weird,
fun.
Yeah, but
it was weird. Okay, the weird thing though is like, so if he's supposed to be, I don't know if this might be like, I have no idea if this has anything to do with it or not. I bought this weird book off Amazon. It was just kind of like a gamble. I'd never heard of it before. And it said old Jewish fairy tales. And so I read like the first one, and it's Og the giant. That's like later on, and that Moses ends up killing. Yeah. So he basically hitches a ride on the ark, and he rides a unicorn and catches a ride to like survive the flood.
Great.
Yeah. So I don't know if maybe like they were like, oh, there was a guy who hitched a ride on the ark, so we can do this with Mickey Rourke's character. I don't know. Like, maybe, who knows if it's just some common like story they tried to tie in. But
I'm unfamiliar with that one, but I
was
love
too.
It. Like, there's so I really like, I mean, like, a lot of the Apocrypha stuff exists because, the same way that like the Mandalorian exists. It exists because people were like, I really like Star Wars. I want more Star Wars. Everybody's like, I really want Jesus. I want more Jesus. And they're like, that's all the Jesus we got. And they're like, no, give me more. And they're like, when he was a kid, he did this. And and so I feel like a lot of it sort of either is, just providing demand for additional religious narrative, or there's also the shadier side of it, which I also really love, which is trying to establish the provenance of relics that would exist. And so they'd be like, well, here's the hat that Jesus wore to his big party. And they're like, what big party? And they're like, let me tell you.
Let me tell you.
Here's the story of Jesus's big party. And then you get the story of Jesus's big party, which I feel like exists almost solely to sell this hat. And there's a few things like that where it's like, oh, okay, well, this is where that story comes from. But like Christmas especially is rife with them because and a lot of, and some of them like come into play with, like we've all sort of accepted now that the Magi are kings despite them not being kings.
Yeah, they were like astrologers, right?
Yeah, they're just Magi. They're wizards.
They're wizards.
That's where we get the word magic. They're just wizards. It's the same thing. They're magicians.
So you should draw that nativity scene and have wizards there.
I'm actually, one of the things I've been working on for a while, and I'm looking to. It's not something I can do, but if I can be involved with it, I would like to. But I've got a Christmas animated thing that I'm wanting to do called Magi, which is basically that. It's just like,
that's fun.
It's three wise men and a baby. Like the Holy Family is fleeing to
three wise
men fleeing to Egypt. They get separated from baby Jesus, and the three Magi have to do it, and have to get him back to his family while the Herod's people are trying to catch him and stuff like that.
Speaking of another one you could maybe draw from on that, Natalie pointed this out to me actually, is she said that Ice Age is basically the same thing as Three Men and a Baby. And I was like, I never noticed that before, but it is. Yeah. So you can maybe watch that and get some ideas from that too.
There you go.
Three wise men.
There's a few. Three wise men and a baby. It writes itself. You're
yeah, that's great.
But I feel like, when I say magic, like I think it would be, like it would be like ninja magic. It's like throwing powders down and disappearing type of stuff. But I think you could have a lot of like good fun sequences like that. Like you have Casper as your old comic relief guy. You've got Melchior as your like super competent like middle-aged wizard who knows everything, and then Balthazar is your point of view character. He's the younger guy. He's real bad at all his things. Like he'll throw powder down and it'll turn his camel into a mouse accidentally, and things like that. But
wait, so what did you say their names were again?
Balthazar, Melchior, and Casper are the traditional ones.
Okay.
So there's a few different ones, but those are the ones that have kind of captured. And so the reason that we tend to go with the three, and the reason they're the three where they are, is that there's a verse that like a prophetic verse that's like, and kings of all the nations shall bow down to him. And no kings bow down to Jesus. So everybody's like, we need some kings bowing down to Jesus. And so they're like, the wise men were kings. And that's where we get the wise men were kings.
Okay.
Is trying to align some of the prophetic Old Testament verses with Jesus's life.
Okay.
And so it's a little bit more of a stretch. And so they're clearly not from all nations, so let's make one of them from each of the continents that we know of at the time. So
that's why they're all different. Like
is Africa.
Okay. I
see. Melchior is Europe, and then Casper is Asia. So he's like supposed to be from Turkey. Melchior is supposed to be from like Croatia or something, that sort of thing. So and they represent historically, they represent the three different stages of life. And so Balthazar is the young one, Melchior is the middle-aged one, and then Casper is the elderly one. So like basically, like in microcosm, they are all of the world and all of mankind visiting Jesus as little avatars of humanity.
Wow, I've never heard that before. That's really interesting.
Which is pretty neat. And then there are other versions, and there's some versions where it's like, well, there are 7 wise men, or there are 12 wise men, or there are 4 wise men. Different cultures have their different takes on who the wise men are and what they were. But I like the 3.
Yeah. I kind of want to ask you the same question that you asked me, going backtracking quite a ways now. Yep. But how do you, when you draw biblical stuff, do you try to get it, like come up with your own context, or do you pull from other? What do you do?
The part of it is thinking about character and thinking about, well, how do I make each of these guys different? What makes Joshua different from Nimrod? What, and like not just in terms of like what they're wearing, but also like what do I think about these guys? Like, is one of them like squirrely? Is one of them like real? Is one of them like sort of a dumb jock? Is one of, like, and kind of lean, not necessarily that's who they are, but like think about like what do I want to convey with this, and making sure that their shapes are different.
I remember you telling me that before, the shapes. That helped a lot. Yeah.
The shapes make a big part of it, like differing body types. That's something that I was dealing with Outlaws Apprentice, is that I realized that some of my characters looked way too similar, especially my lady characters. Like I had two different lady sword fighters and they had the exact same body type, essentially. And I was like, well, how do I change this? And so what I did, and what I usually do, is I'll go in with like a chunky black marker and I'll just make just the most basic shape silhouettes, like not even trying to make human looking shapes, but just shapes. Like this shape looks like a comma. This shape looks like a square. This is a circle. This looks like a bowling pin. And doing it that way and just keeping reworking the ones that are too similar helps me to find things. And so I found, like, for one of the lady sword fighter characters, these two kind of like peaked roof things that I was able to incorporate into her design by having her wear this like armored skirt that kind of flips out at the bottom, and these shoulder pads that kind of, it's like a mantle as opposed to shoulder pads. It's like drapes over her whole neck and shoulders, and then also kind of peeks out. And it's a lot more subtle in the final version than it is in the really stylized silhouette, but it helps. And so when I'm thinking about like Bible characters, I think, well, what other character is kind of similar to this one, and how do I make them look very different? And so, like, if I were doing David and Jonathan, how would I? And I've got to do David and Jonathan soon, so I'm like, how do I make them look different? So I'm like, I feel like we have a tendency with king characters to make them kind of big and broad, like modern day Disney dads. There was a time where all the Disney dads were basically just like potatoes. And now they're all like these strapping dudes. But I think, like probably I'd make Jonathan real slender, and David would probably be like real low to the ground and broad. But I'm like, but then how do I contrast that with Saul? Like, what would Saul be like? Like, he can't be low to the ground and broad if David is. So like, what do I make Saul look like? Is Saul like, he was a farmer before he was a soldier guy, so like, do I lean into like Depression era farmer build? Like, is he real lean and creaky? Like, now I'm starting to think about it. I'm like, does he look like Jack Palance? Like, is he like, so I kind of like, a lot of it is less figuring out what they look like on their own and more thinking about the context of the other characters, because that thinking about, well, what makes them different forces me to think about, well, now I know what that difference is. How do I exaggerate that? How do I play that up? How do I make that reflected not only in his body type or her body type, but also in the clothes that they're wearing, in the body language, things like that. And so it all kind of starts to, there's a lot of different things that are running through my head at any given point. Plus, when there are descriptions, sometimes there's, just straight up descriptions in there, like he's fleet of foot, like a gazelle. I'm like, well, okay, so he's, we know he's real fast. Is he lean? Does he look like an Ethiopian runner? Like, what's his body type? Like, and I feel like you get that across really well in your,
because I drew antlers on him.
But I think that's a big factor. And then also, I really like looking at archaeology stuff and Bible people tend to be pretty minimal on armor, which is fair. They probably would be, but I'm like, man, like, I'm like, well, for Saul, for example, like, what in that general region, which, I mean, granted, like they're in a very small and specific geographic locale, but there's a lot of cultures around that immediate thing.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like looking at like Babylonian stuff and things like that. What is the most ridiculous armor that somebody could in theory be wearing at this point? Because like, you know, when David's like, oh, the armor is too heavy for me, like chances are that armor is like a, you know, a breastplate and maybe a helmet. Like there's not that much. So like, how do you make that armor too heavy? Like, what do you add to Saul's armor to make it ridiculous to give it to a kid? And also at that point, you're like, well, Saul's got to be big enough that this armor has to be big when it is on teenage David. So that also now starts to influence my, well, what does Saul look like? Is Saul like, did Samuel pick him because he's like, this is the dude that like nobody else is going to beat up, ergo?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how it sounds in the story. It's like, oh, this guy's head and shoulders above everybody else. He's a big guy.
Yeah. So I'm like, so now my Saul starts to be pretty big, but he can't be too big because then you got Goliath. So it's like,
yeah, that's true.
So
although Goliath was a giant though, if you want to pull in more of the myth thing, although that might make people mad, but you could pull in and just go all out with it and make him a giant.
Do you do Goliath as like straight up like Jack and the Beanstalk giant? Like, is he enormous? Is he just a slightly big dude?
I mean, it's weird because that when it talks about Goliath's brothers later on, and like I think it's the end of Samuel or something, and one of them has like 24 digits because he's got 6 fingers on each hand and stuff. It's like they're weird looking. I don't know. You could lean into it.
I love it. Yeah. That's fun. And I mean, and again, you know, like so much of it is interpretation. Like, yes, Goliath is one dude. Could you interpret him as being, you know, like a Voltron of Philistines, like one guy on another guy's shoulders, and then they're standing on 2 other guys, and they've all got swords? Like, you couldn't, but you could. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
oh no, I think it
like
might
ways to do that can be fun. And the thing is, if there is what?
Oh, sorry, I think it just froze up for a second.
Oh, sorry. If there is any weirdness, that's what I want to jump on. Like,
okay, yeah.
We did a Genesis thing in my Sunday school that was supposed to be a 6-week course, and it ended up taking us like 2 years because like every single verse we're like, hold on, we've got to unpack this.
Yeah. That's gotta be fun. That sounds so much fun.
And I feel like that's the kind of stuff that I get really excited about. Is you read something, and if you're paying attention, you're like, wait, what? Like that? What is what I want to draw?
Yeah. The whole that's why I love reading the Bible. I just read it over and over because the whole Bible's like that, especially Genesis, and then even in Exodus too. There's so much stuff in there where you're like, if you actually read it and just pause for a second, you're like, what the heck is this? What's going on here?
There's a lot of questions that I have. Yeah, I won't like some of them are more adult leaning, so I won't bring it up.
Yeah.
On the thing. But there are a few where I'm like, wait.
Yeah.
What? Like there are a lot of things where it's like, oh, okay, well, you know, you learn like there's plenty of scholarship as to what this is and what it is that we're talking about. But we have not talked about this. Like, let's get into that.
Yeah.
But we were like debating like whether or not the ark had a roof. Like we were, you know, like we were all.
The ark had. Oh, really? Does it? I think it says somewhere where like it takes off the covering or something at some point. Yeah.
We're like, what does that mean? Like, so we were like, what are like 10 different ways of drawing this ark where we're not technically wrong according to the Bible, you know? So
yeah.
But it's fun. But I'm like, I want that weird. So I'm like, is the ark just a cube? Is it actually a boat, or is it just a box that he expects to float? You know, like we always see it drawn as a boat. And I'm like,
he's been alive for 600 years. He could probably come up with something better than a box. I don't know. Maybe.
You know, who knows?
Yeah. He's just, that's funny. Yeah.
Is it round? It could be. Oh.
Yeah. It's like a hamster ball.
Circumference? I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway,
that's
that kind of stuff is fun for me.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. I would have loved to be there for 2 years going into it. Seriously, Genesis is just, even the first 3 chapters. That's where every time I try to read through, I start through Genesis, I could spend like an hour just looking at the first 3 chapters, just like, what the heck is going on?
And that's the kind of stuff that I love. And I'm lucky in that I have a lot of friends. Depending on who your group is, some people are going to feel more comfortable about that than others. And so like we've the denomination where I am, like we've got a lot of former Baptists because Baptist church, the local Baptist church split over something about 20 years ago, and a lot of them came over to our church. And the Disciples of Christ people are a lot more comfortable like delving into the weird specifics than some of the former Baptists. I think just culturally, like, I think part of it is just how you were raised to respond to the Bible. Like, is it like, and part of it is biblical inerrancy. It's, whether or not is this the, like, I take the shape that it is the word of God is interpreted by man to the best of man's ability. I know some folks who are like, no, this is straight up word of God, like breathed onto the page. And it's a, and I think that takes a lot to it. And so the people who are like, well, this, if you start to question things, like if you're spending a half hour debating a verse as to like what it like,
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean.
It can be stressful for some people.
And
it seems sacrilegious in a way that is not intended, but it's
because some people, like, you just read it and you just get caught up in the story and you love the story. But then some people, I understand why it's very. I think it's somewhat the way people think too, because some people think very, very mathematically or something, and it's like very particular. And then if you try to remove any of that or be like, hey, well, let's look at it from this angle, like just things get unstable. And so it's like, and then and so it's understandable because it's panicky. It's like, no, it has to be this way because otherwise my world's going to crumble, sort of thing. Like,
and I think, and that's a fact. And I think that is, and that's not to say that the folks who have that point of view, like, have less faith. Like, it's just as it's not to say that questioning it all means that you have less faith. It's just different ways of approaching. You're coming from it from different places.
The more I personally, like, when I first started reading the Bible, I was definitely more hard line. I think because of that, maybe the way I'd been raised too. But then the more I stay in the Bible, the more you read it, it kind of just breaks down your categories and your preconceived ideas. And you have to stop and be like, wait, so this is not what I've always thought it was and stuff. So it's, but that makes it fun.
But that's what keeps it interesting and fun. And exciting is like, like I'm constantly, you can reread something that you've read 100 times and find a different thing in it each time. But I tend to, but I'm like, but then that reinterpretation becomes a thing. Like, I won't say the Pledge of Allegiance because of, Jesus's admonition against public oaths. Like there's different things, like, where I'll read things, I'm like, this is now how I interpret this, and this is affecting my day-to-day life. And it's, and sometimes it's obnoxious. So
that's true.
I don't know.
Dang. So do you have like your Jonathan and David thing? Are you going to start doing stories, or like this Bible stories, or is it just you're just drawing the characters for commission?
It would just be the figures. Like, I'd just be making them and then making it to where people can cut them out and play with them or use them in Sunday school or school.
Okay, that's like fun.
But one of my categories in that Patreon thing is scripture Old Testament scripture characters.
That's fun.
And I had a few people that picked that, and so I'm like, hooray, I get to do that. And so I'm like, well,
what they pick?
What do I want to start with? Like, I'm like, I feel like I gotta start with like Samuel and Kings, because that's my favorite stuff. Like, that's the fun stuff.
But
also I really like fighting, and that's where most of the fighting is. So
And the ghost that I love that when I finally did that drawing and you were like, you've like commented on it or something, the ghost Samuel thing. Yeah. I was like, yeah, Christians don't believe in ghosts, but there's a ghost, right?
I know there's a ghost. It's a straight, it doesn't say, yeah. That's the thing where there was that move in the 70s, because I think that's a relatively new interpretation.
Okay.
That ghosts are just evil spirits or something. And
Okay.
I think that's like 1970s onward. But I'm like, no, like
Samuel, yeah.
There's that. Like Samuel's definitely a ghost. And then also there's the scene where they go to Jesus and they're like, it's Jesus, he's a ghost. And he's like, guys, I'm not a ghost. Yeah. You can touch me.
Yeah.
And what that means to me is that Jesus knows there are ghosts and that you can't touch them. And that's his proof. He doesn't say there are no ghosts. He says, no, look, touch me. I'm not a ghost.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole part too. Yeah, that confuses me because doesn't he like appear in the middle of them too? He just like, and they're like freak out, and then he's like, no, hold on. It's just I'm like, how did he just appear? Yeah, it's
anyway,
crazy.
I like all that kind of stuff. Like
me too. Yeah, really I remember
fun.
You told me one time a long time ago. This was a while back too. I can't remember what we were talking about, and you said there was a sorceress's battle in the Book of Acts, and then you read it, and it's like says they're sorcerers. Yeah.
And, is it Peter? It's like the wizard battle from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. It really is.
But you never look at it through that lens because it's all.
Yeah, I think
because we see it through Sunday school. But I'm like, you could play like if you were dramatizing that, like it could be crazy.
Yeah, because I think it's either Paul or Peter, and the sorceress comes and does something, and he basically like calls down some black cloud on him, I think. And like,
I just picture them like waving their hands around and zapping each other. Like it would be great, but you don't. But you never see it like.
That'd be fun.
And I think that's the fun thing is that we get sort of a kind of like so much of the time like a homogenized view of things, and I think that part of the for lack of a better word, the fun of these stories is that you can interpret them different ways, and I really do love when you can be not technically wrong and go bonkers, like because I think that like as long like there are things in the text that as long as you're not like it doesn't say he wasn't blue, like that kind of thing. Like that's the kind of stuff that I get pumped about.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, well, that's cool.
I
so
should probably wrap up if that's all right with you. Could you stuff this evening?
I was gonna ask one more thing before you go. Since I have this video also, I might upload it to YouTube if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Do you have anything like you want to show though on the camera, like any biblical characters you've drawn, or just anything you're working on? Or
like, well, what do I?
You don't have to. Sorry, I dropped that on you. Just so people
can. It's fine. I've got the Outlaws Apprentice page right here, like one of my sample pages.
Sweet.
So this is one of the pages. So these are the if I can get my finger up here. These are the characters. You've got the kid's name is Bill and the mercenary's name is Erska.
That's so cool.
And they'll be like wandering through the woods and getting into sword fights.
Nice. That's cool. Fun.
But I also want to do a thing where like there will be like sword fight lessons, and she'll be giving it because I'm like that kind of stuff is really fun for me. And I'm
that's cool.
It's gonna be pumped. So I'll be starting that, and I'm gonna do a rough draft of it with sort of loose pencils all the way through before tightening things up, and then once that's done, I'll go through and start doing the final art. And I'm planning on serializing this online and doing like I don't know, like 10 pages a week or something like that.
Okay.
And posting them up. And then as I get near the end, I'll put together a physical book and make that available for sale.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks for doing this, Chris.
My pleasure, Jason. It's really good. It's good to see your face.
Yeah, it is. We need to do this more often. This is a lot of fun. This is fun. I'm learning a lot,
we can get together up at the cabin sometime soon.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. So.
Speaking of which, did they get the well sunk yet?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think they still
Man,
haven't.
geez.
As far as I know, they haven't. So yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's only been like 2 years.
I know. Well, you know,
It's crazy.
we're in the same boat. We're looking to get something on the side of the house demoed, and it's been, you know, about a year.
Dang, that's crazy.
So,
yeah.
it is what it is. All right. Have a good one. Say hi to your family for me.
Yeah, you too. Say hi to them. All right. See you, Chris.
Thanks, pal.
Bye.